our first report, we also brought together thought leaders, activists, artists, community members from around the country to come together to talk about how do we activate now? How do we take this research and bring it into our communities? How do we bring it into our organizations? How do we bring it into our workplaces? And how do we continue collectively to make the case for compassion? Why this is critical work for our country, quite frankly, for our world moving forward. So in just a second, you'll see that video. But let me tell you, this is just the launching pad. This is just the start. This was the first annual Muhammad Ali Index, the first annual Compassion Report, the first annual Compassion Summit. It's a growing body of work. It's going to require all of us. Part of what we've done over the last year is start to cultivate what we're calling impact partners. These are nonprofit organizations, civic organizations from around the country who've agreed to amplify, adopt, to activate on this work, who want to be a part of this growing movement. So I want to invite all of you to be a part of that as well. If you have an organization, you want to be in partnership with us, you want to be a part of these convenings, you want to just be a part of this growing movement, be in conversation with me before you leave here today. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about it. In the next few weeks, we're going to try to convene people here in our city to start to talk about the report and how to activate on it. But it's not just us. It's organizations and people from around our country who all are committed to try to move our world forward in a compassionate way. And Garrett, are we good to go now? All right, then let me step over to the side and let you all see this video.
Good morning and welcome to the launch of the Muhammad Ali Index. Right here is a beacon of hope. It's an incredible gift to our nation to show and share where we are as it relates to compassion.
There was a 4,000% increase in the search for compassion. People have a hunger for compassion.
With the right tools, every single person can do something right now. The Muhammad Ali Index is that tool.
As fellow conspirators, politicians, activists, athletes, artists, we've got an incredible opportunity to introduce new programs, curricula rooted in the power of compassion.
A lot of people think compassion is soft. Really? I say, well, try it.
It might be weird to say we're having a compassion conversation. What's the dude from Forbes doing here?
You have a guy from Forbes here. You have a girl from Fox News here. Compassion is not only good for your heart, but it's also good for your wallet. You have to make the economic case constantly for compassion.
As a company, you can't just be giving people enough to live by if you aren't also giving them something to live for.
Yeah.
Together, let's translate compassion into action.
We want this work to be impactful. Let us be committed. Let us be connected. Let us be partners.
Muhammad Ali used his power to make a difference. We can too.
Thank you. Thank you. Garrett, if you can put the slide with the pledge on it, I'd appreciate that. So what I'm going to ask all of you to do today, if you are willing, like Devon said, let us be committed, let us be connected, let us be partners in this work. The first thing that we're asking for individuals and organizations to do is to take our compassion pledge. This is a pledge that simply says that you commit to being a part of this movement, that you commit to bringing and cultivating compassion within our communities, that you want to see a more compassionate world. So go ahead, take your phones out if you don't mind. Got the QR code right here. If your QR code doesn't work for you, you can go to aliindex.org, aliindex.org. You'll find the pledge right there on our page and take the pledge. Be a part of it. We have thousands of people from around our country who've already started to sign. It's a growing movement. It's one that we are going to continue to cultivate, to drive forward from the center, but we need all of you to be a part of it. And we're really thrilled that you're here today, and we're really thrilled that I see so many of you taking the first step to take the pledge with us today. So thank you all so much. And Devon, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sign the pledge. Sign the pledge. We've got thousands of people who are making a commitment to support this work, and some are making real tangible investments to support it. Others are showing up in other ways to do work through their organizations, through their respective households. But the idea is to make sure that we keep this work moving and to help you better understand it. My hope is that you guys make time to look at that report, because you'll start to truly understand that compassion, in order for it to be activated at its highest levels, requires us as a community to operate in certain ways. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that, because as this work continues for us, we want the Muhammad Ali Center to function. I guess I could use a microphone, huh? We want the Muhammad Ali Center to function as a repository for compassionate agendas and activities that are happening around the nation. You'll see us leading much of that work. But what we also know is that there's an incredible amount of work that's happening in other places, and information about compassion that's embedded in so many others that need to be highlighted and profiled, which is one of the reasons why we're gathered here today with our panelists. And so I want to start by introducing our panelists, and we'll begin to have a conversation around their experiences and understanding of some of the work that we're going to be discussing today. I want to start by introducing, and I don't see her now. Is she there? Okay, well we'll save her for later. I was going to start with the most senior queen in our community, who's done an incredible amount of work in this space. But I want to introduce you all to Dr. Stephen Kelsey. You make your way on up. We'll make your way on up to the stage. Is a retired Louisville Metro police officer of 25 years and currently serves as the behavior and mental health specialist for EMS here in Louisville. He's the founding pastor of Spirit-Filled New Life Church Ministries and CEO of Fresh Start Education and Counseling Center, located here in Louisville, Kentucky. He has over 30 years of ministry and counseling experience and has a personal mantra that I love of loyalty, commitment, and no excuses. Dr. Kelsey serves on multiple boards. He's the author of several books, The Psychosocial Experience of Retired Police Officers, The Psychology of Sin and Salvation, and Chosen in Spite of. He's a motivational speaker who also preached locally, nationally, internationally in places like London, Canada, India, Trinidad, Africa, and the Netherlands. And through his work, he provides transformative care that empowers individuals towards a fresh start while bringing innovative and culturally sensitive approaches to mental health. So let's welcome Dr. Kelsey. Next, I want to introduce Tiffany Benjamin. Tiffany is the CEO of the Humana Foundation, our neighbor right across the street. She guides the foundation in establishing new ways to co-create healthy communities and eliminate unjust differences in U.S. health and health care. She's committed to closing systemic gaps in mental behavior health, nutrition, and food security. She leads the foundation's philanthropic disaster response and recovery strategy, as well as its scholarships and associate giving program. She brings a strong understanding of healthcare systems and policy and the social determinants of health. Prior to coming here, Tiffany was the president of the Eli Lilly and Company Foundation in Indianapolis and the senior director and social impact at Eli Lilly and Company. Excuse me. In 2020, she led Lilly's global philanthropic efforts in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and its philanthropic efforts to address racial inequality in the United States. She's also served as the senior investigative counsel for the United States House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee. And she has a law degree from Harvard Law School and is an undergraduate degree in journalism and political science from Indiana University. She has a ton of accolades. I don't have enough time to read them all, but she's most recently recognized as one of the most powerful and most influential leaders here in the city of Louisville. And I will lastly note that Tiffany writes extensively about topics around private philanthropy and health equity and teaches undergraduate courses at Indiana University, Lilly's School of Philanthropy. She's an incredibly accomplished woman, and if I were in the hood, I would simply say she's a bad sister. Next, I want to introduce my friend who many of us in this room know, Mr. Lamont Collins. Lamont is an incredibly dynamic leader, former U of L football player, and stands as the 67-year-old visionary CEO and founder of the Roots 101 African American Museum. Lamont has a journey that began in preserving African American history when his mother gifted him Muhammad Ali's autograph, sparking passion for collecting artifacts that tell the story of Black culture. He seamlessly blends his athletic background with a fervent commitment to cultural preservation, and through Roots 101, he strives to amplify the narratives of African Americans, fostering understanding and appreciation. With an indomitable spirit, Lamont continues to inspire and educate, leaving an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, not just here in Louisville, Kentucky, but around this nation. And last but definitely not least is Miss Elmer Lucille Allen. Yes, she's worthy of that round of applause. Miss Lucille, who is 93 years old, that's right. She's been recognized as one of the Muhammad Ali Center's Daughters of Greatness. She is a retired chemist who was the first African-American chemist in 1966 at Brown-Forman, one of the largest family-owned companies in the field of spirits and wine. She retired in 1997 as a senior analyst chemist after 31 years of service. But she didn't stop then. She earned her master's degree, completely pivoting from serving as a chemist to the world of art, where she earned a Master's of Art and Studio Art degree at the University of Louisville in 2002, and a Doctor of Humane Letters at Spalding University in 2024. You talk about continued learning, ladies and gentlemen. Elmer Lucille's been known for her volunteer service in the artistic community since the early 1980s. In 2000, she was recruited to pursue a master's degree in ceramics and has since played many critical roles in the regional arts community. And she is plays an integral role in the art community. In addition to the arts, she attends meetings about civic issues and that impact her community within the Louisville area, and she is a true lifelong learner. For those of you who haven't seen it, a mural was designed at Jackson and Caldwell Street that commemorate Miss Allen and the incredible contributions that she's made to our community. Ladies and gentlemen, won't you celebrate? And let's make sure we've got enough of these to go around. If not, I hope you guys don't mind sharing. Just there's the three there, so we'll share those. So we want to spend some time today talking about compassion and how it impacts the African American experience, how it's shown up in your respective places of work and the work that you have actually done and seen, particularly in this community in Louisville, Kentucky. And so, Ms. Elmer Lucille Allen, we want to start with you by simply asking a question around your experience, having witnessed nearly a century of history from segregation to civil rights victories. Can you talk to us real simply about what some of the biggest challenges you've seen and how communities practice compassion and what we still need to change based on this trajectory that you've seen us on over the 93 years you've been here?
Well, good morning to everyone. What I think needs to be done, we need to teach our young people how to interact with others. Also, learning does not stop when you finish college. You learn every day. And I say I'm 93 years old, and I'm going somewhere at least 3 or 4 times a week. But you have to interact with other people, not your age, because most people my age are sitting at home watching TV, and that's all they do. And I'm still a student at UL, I'm in ceramics, and most of the thing I go to class, and there are children, students there that are 18 and 19. And I make everybody speak to me when I come in. Hello? But also, it's that learning does not stop. And that we need to interact and go out with our other friends. We don't have to actually see them, but you need to interact with people every day. And what I do is that, and also you need to be computer literate. That's most important nowadays, because now every day that you pick up a computer, everything has to be scanned. But I would just like to say we have to be friends, and you have to realize is that what you do comes back to you. Whatever you do comes back to you. And I'm looking around this room, and I see young people that that I have worked with over the period of years, and I'm sitting here next to Lamont, but it's just very nice to be here, and I will answer any question anyone has. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ann. So Lamont, so we'll transition to you because for those of you who haven't been to Roots 101 Museum, it is an incredible display of the African American journey that started even before we landed on this continent, and the way that you tell that story at Roots 101. And at the museum, you not only use the exhibits to tell a story, but you are part of that experience for many people who are going through that museum, and you create a broader experience by sharing with them much of the Black experience. Roots 101, we know, is dedicated to preserving and amplifying the African American history, but how does sharing and your experience in seeing that, sharing our story and our collective history, foster greater compassion and understanding for people who enter into the doors of the Roots 101 Museum?
Well, good morning, everyone. I think the greatest thing about what we do at Roots is compassion. We talk about the story and the strength of our struggle. And we are having a room in the museum called Big Mama's House, right? And Big Mama's House shows the compassion of Black people. So even when our story wasn't told, Big Mama told our history. Even when we put in history books, Big Mama told our history. And when you go in our room, go in that room, you find out that we loved America when America didn't love us. Big Mama put the compassion of Black people that we love and never hate. No matter what we go through, we have the compassion to get through it. So at Roots, we deal with that from a perspective of history, why they divide us instead of bring us together. You know, Black history is American history. It could not be history without Black people in this country, and it would not be history without white people. But the story they continue to tell us is that we're separated. But think of the white allies that were involved in the struggle. See, from the time that we had Underground Railroad and all those things, it was white people that were involved in the process to make America great, just like it was Black people. So do we tell that story on both sides, how it does not divide us, but it makes us the greatest country in the world, then we reach where we need to go. And that's what Roots 101 does.
It does an incredible job of it, incredible job. Dr. Kelsey, you are a retired police officer who made your way on every television in this city years ago when a young girl was shot in the head, and you were the first on the scene, put her in your car, didn't wait for the ambulance to show up, but you put her in your car and drove her to the hospital in an effort that essentially saved her life. And I would imagine that's probably one of the more intense experiences you've had as a police officer, but I can't imagine it was the only intense experience you've had. You have an incredibly unique perspective with decades of service as a police officer, but also operating as a pastor, as a chaplain. You get to recognize the significance and the need for compassion in ways that I don't think a lot of other people truly get a chance to see it and experience. And I'm curious from your perspective, as a retired police officer and now behavioral mental health specialist, how law enforcement and faith-based organizations can work to build trust and compassion in communities that have historically felt marginalized and not felt truly connected in real ways. You've been on both sides of that spectrum, and I'm curious to know from your perspective what work you think might be able to be done to help us build some bridges between those worlds.
Good morning, everyone. Stating back, it was 2006 when I was the last person on the scene.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't even my run, but I never heard any more chitter chatter on the radio. So I decided to cruise down to Dixie Wilson. And I got out of the car, saw everybody standing there. And as I approached the door where everybody was standing, I saw a person with a call 1080 had been murdered. Said that they laying there, and a trail of blood leading from the body. So that's an indication that somebody moved away from the scene. So myself and my partner went into the house, walked all the way around the house, followed the blood, and there was a small baby, a 2-year-old baby, Erica, later known as Erica Hughes. We picked her up, ran her down the street, put her in my police car, and I saw 2 EMT workers getting off the apparatus. I said, hey, jump in the back of my police car. They had already called for EMS, but EMS was trapped on the Sherman Mitten. And so the compassion I had, I'd already have children. And the father in me disregarded the fact that it was a crime scene, that somebody had already been murdered. I just knew that if we could respond, we could give this child an opportunity to survive. And so with the compassion can also get you in trouble. I was just an officer, not a sergeant, no rank. I get on the radio and tell radio I need all the streets to be shut down. Never happened before. And I hear all this clicking on the radio. What is he talking about? I said, I need the streets to be shut down. I got to take this baby to the hospital. Somebody said, you're not an ambulance. Well, you have compassion, and it's life and death. Your title, your money, your position, your skin color does not matter. So we went down Dixie Highway, Broadway, and just normally driving it with all the red lights, it'll take up to 15, 20 minutes. We made it to the hospital under 6 minutes. And I smelled the brakes while we was rolling. And once we got it down there, Dr. Smock said later, if we did not respond the way we did, she would not be alive. And I'm glad to say, I talked with Erica 2 days ago. She's 21 years old. She has a little baby, good friends. But when we talk about compassion, policing and pastoring at the same time. I was a pastor and a police officer at the same time. Some people thought I started pastoring after I retired. I didn't simultaneously. Going to school, get my education. Because I realized we could not arrest our way out of what was happening. I was like my fathers, sons, and grandsons. And I realized something is wrong with the community in which I've been living in, invested in. Compassion will bridge a gap that if these 2 words I've always had, culture appropriation and acculturation. Culture appropriation is when you take somebody's culture and you're mimicking them, trying to bring them down low. But acculturation is I'm trying to find out, instead of using my biases to judge you, I'm trying to find the compassion that what makes you you, what makes me me, and how can we come together and live as one.
It starts with an understanding. So, compassion. You know, we talk about that word, and I want to try to give it some context for the purposes of this work that we're doing at the Muhammad Ali Center and the conversation that we're having here. You know, I think a lot of times people conflate empathy and compassion, and I see them as two completely different things. Empathy is a feeling you have for someone who might be struggling in some way. Your heart goes out to them, but it doesn't require you to do anything. Compassion is the response to that feeling that makes you shut down the streets and address issues to make someone's life better. And so when we talk about compassion, we're talking about more than a feeling, but we're talking about an action, something that we do. And so with that, Tiffany, you have work that you lead at the Humana Foundation that focuses on addressing systemic health disparities. Talk to us about how compassion plays a role in shaping the policies and initiatives that promote health equity, because so much of the time we talk about compassion, I think we often see it and view it as a one-on-one experience. But the reality is compassion lives in systems and policies as well. Am I right?
100%. Good morning, because everybody else said good morning, so good morning. Thank you. And I'm so pleased I get to follow that story with my very boring life, so thank you for that too. So what I would say is the last Surgeon General said we are in a loneliness epidemic. That is real. Like, people are feeling lonely and they're feeling aloneness. Lonely means you don't have people around you, like Dr. Elma was saying. Aloneness means that you have people around you, but you still feel alone and not connected. We saw during COVID that got substantially worse across generations. We also saw seniors, older folks, became more isolated, but we frankly saw youth become more isolated. We saw worse statistics in terms of mental health, suicide ideation, substance use disorder. These problems have always existed. COVID just exacerbated them, and it showed where race, ethnicity provided additional challenges, like just being real about it. And so we looked at that and said, we have to respond. We've done health equity work for a really long time. And we added a mental health component to the work that we do. We want to address the loneliness epidemic directly. We want to acknowledge that people need to feel connected and seen across generations, across any form of difference. And so we get up every day and we think about how can we make a difference in that way. One of the reasons I love this index is because we do a lot of work that's about the data and the action around making a difference. There is the feeling it's really important, but frankly, I work for a corporate foundation and corporations do metrics and math. We fund an initiative called Face the Fight, which is a veteran suicide prevention initiative where we actually measure lives saved by the initiative. We measure it, the impact of it. And things like the index are deeply important in showing people, you may feel this, but here's how we act on it, and here's how we create movements that involve organizations and people and everybody. And so I think the index is a wonderful example of how you drive movements and change and energy. You measure it and you hold people accountable to what they say, and that is how you drive a change and how people feel connected to each other.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I'm so glad you said that, because this compassion report and the Muhammad Ali Index is not just a tool to share compassion levels with communities, but it's designed really to create examples for change that legislators, policymakers, educators, business leaders can consider as they provide leadership for how our world continues to evolve. Miss Allen, we find ourselves once again here in America having race conversations, not just because it's Black History Month, but because there, for many people, feels to be an attack from places now around brown and Black skinned people in this country. And you have an incredible experience being a groundbreaker in corporate America here in this city. And I think so often when we hear those stories, we focus solely on the person, particularly the African American person, who broke into some glass ceiling. But the reality is there is a collection of people who helped make that happen. Talk to us about your experience becoming the first Black chemist and Black female chemist at Brown-Forman, and what that experience was like, and how you got yourself into that position, and the people around you who helped make that happen.
When you think about 1966, and when I went to Brown-Forman, and I still have not changed. Here I am, take me as I am. And so, but in the lab, there were 4 women, and I was the only African American out of about 10 people. And what you have to do, if you know what you do, let them know, this is what I'm here to do. And so you cannot tell me I'm working for the company. I'm not working for you. I'm working for the company. And when I went to Brown-Forman, we were not what we call computer literate at that time. So all my skills that I have now, I learned at Brown-Forman. They had VisiCal and Lotus, and that's what I started. And I also started doing a database. And I'm still doing those things. And from my home, people said, how you learn? But I've been doing them all the time. And also when I was there, you had to document everything that you did. And when you think about bourbon whiskey, it only has corn, rye, and malt. And so it all had to be, I had to analyze those ingredients. And then from there, I went to doing other things, within the company. And so all my computer skills that I use today, I owe to them. And I can say that Brown-Forman has done a lot for the West End. I still live in West End. I live by Chickasaw Park. And Brown-Forman has done a lot for the West End. And so, and I look at the neighborhood and what they have done. And also, when you think about there are people that I also work with, there were other African Americans there. They became secretaries, and then there was John Churchill, who was there, who became the vice president. And so there are a lot of things that we see within a company, but it's not really talked about, and it's not. People don't know that it's actually happened. But like I say, all my computer skills I learned at Brown-Forman, and I still communicate. When I went there in 1966, there was one fellow, Wesley Hazel, and he and I are the only 2 people that are still alive. And his wife takes our birthdays are both in August, and she takes us to our birthday parties in August. And his name is Wesley Hazel. And so we're still friends. But how many other people say that you continue to communicate with people that you work with when you retire? Very few. But you have to be friends. And I just like to say thank you all for inviting me here today. And to sit here and look at everybody and say, I never thought I would be up here on the stage. And I knew Muhammad Ali as a little boy. He lived on Hale. And I've been down in West End. We were built there in 1960. And I'm still in West End. Thank you so very much.
And let me be really clear. 93 years old, but she emails and texts probably better than most of you all. She is incredibly technologically literate. It's amazing. I love it. Lamont, you heard Tiffany share these alarming statistics and this data that we continue to hear about people in our country who are experiencing incredible cases of isolation and loneliness. In addition to that, we find ourselves incredibly polarized here in this nation, and in many cases, it seems unwilling to listen or to talk to one another. You, on the other hand, have a space that's had the ability to attract people from many different backgrounds, and when they show up in your space, you are able to facilitate conversations with them that in many cases help enlighten them about the Black experience in ways that they weren't before. Tell us what you see the outcome of those conversations being, and how, if at all, they are helping to sort of reduce these barriers that continue to seem to divide us.
Well, first of all, like the great wizard, I need to give me 2 years back to my life. I'm 65, not 67.
I'm sorry.
Let's get that straight first. Get that back to me. Anyway, I think what we do at Roots as a whole is that, the word compassion comes up, but I think that's what we're about anyway. I think Roots is a healing space. And when I talk about history, it's about education. If you don't know my story, then you don't know me. So when we're talking about history and the compassion of who we all come from, there's a way for it to become a healing space. Because America's used history or using race as a sword that's never been treated. And we leave that open sword and we treat it when you come at Roots 101. And when people treat the sword, then you can treat the problem that you deal with. And that's what we do on a daily basis. Black history is not 28 days a month. In a month, it's 365 days. And if it's 365 days, then I have 365 days to teach our story. So the more I teach the story, more education you get, the more you get an understanding of who I am and what I am. And at Roots, that's what we do. Nobody comes in that museum and walks. They come in one way, walk out a different way. They have a foundation they never heard about. Young people, especially Black kids here, that we're descendants of kings and queens. White kids hear that Black people have a history. They hear that we came from nothing, but every museum in the country has our artwork in it, right? And then we talk about that somehow we took America away, but we birthed your children in the process. You talk about we were 3/5 human, but yet you used the breast milk of Black women to feed your children. So when you look at the inconsistencies of the story, of our story, and then I'm telling the truth to our story, it changes everything. It becomes a game changer. And if education matters, education matters. That means my story matters, your story matters. And if America's true to education, why not educate us instead of tell us there is no story?
So Bishop Kelsey, retired police officer, and we've, over the last several years, watched and witnessed some brutal acts of policing. Some around the country, and unfortunately one right here in Louisville, Kentucky, that impacted not just our city, our state, but quite frankly, the world. And there's a Black community and a larger community as well that looks at those examples and wonders why they don't see compassion show up in those examples as police are interacting and engaging, particularly with Black people. But I'd love to hear your experience because, one, I recognize that not every interaction leads to some tragedy, but help us understand what that experience was like for you and how the average person on the street can understand what police actually do to build compassion in the way that they interact, particularly with Black communities.
This book right here, Slave Patrol. This is the genesis of policing in America. When slaves would run away from their masters, Caucasians were commissioned to go get back masters' property. They were later identified as patrolmen, police officers. And the only role African Americans had in patrolling is run beside the horses to point out where the slave is. So that's why in America there was, and there still is, an attitude that African Americans are runaway slaves. So when I was thinking about becoming a police officer, I started doing the genesis of how police started. And I understand that all police officers don't have a hidden agenda. But if you read this book and you follow the nomenclature of how policing is supposed to be done, you will see how some of them follow the blueprint. And in following the blueprint, it's all in here. If you told or talked about your fellow officer, you was isolated. That's the blueprint. Because only in America they believe that whites could be police officers. So that's why here in the city of Louisville, there was a dissent decree to hire black people to be officers in 1972, Shelby area. I did all this history before I decided to be a police officer. So if Shelby and others who decided to be police officers couldn't be police officers because they said blacks couldn't be police officers, then how can we make the difference in patrolling our own people? Now the flip side of that, when I patrolled in the West End, when there were the projects, every one of us that worked in the 4th District with LPD, before LMPD, were African American. We all lived in the West End. So when we got off work, when we went to Kroger's at 28th and Broadway, we saw the same people that we were patrolling. It was an investment, not shift work. So it's easy to disengage with the people that you're patrolling if you don't understand their culture. And when we policed in the West End with the projects, not Park Duval, we didn't shoot anybody. I never tased or maced. I was shot at. I've been cut. But I never shot and killed when I had opportunities to. Because what they teach you, once the threat is over, the threat is over. But some people still live based on this. Then I'm just going to go and kill you. And because you had a weapon, I could be easily justified. And in the horrific tragedy in 1981, when we all saw the videotape of Rodney King, before cameras, we knew without a shadow of doubt, them officers were going to be convicted. But because of this mentality, he was a runaway. But now let's talk about that diverse discrimination. Patrolling in the West End among black people was not good for me. But I wanted to be there. I was called a sellout, working for the man. When black people would see me, they would spit when they see me coming. They say, you're a sellout, you betrayed your own people. But then when the white officer comes, they would talk to him. But when the white officer put their club across their head, then they called me. You see, there is a confusion. And so even with the Breonna Taylor case that happened, I was on both sides of the fence. And I told my wife when it happened, I said, that's a bad shot. That's a bad kill. Number one, I said, what they need to do before it came out, I said, they need to check the search warrant. I said, those search warrants are not validated and right, then that was an illegal kill. And then it came out because police officers know this stuff. So, when I say policing, I had compassion. I could have quit. And my wife said, why don't you just quit, do something else? I said, if they don't see me, how are they going to become what they need to become? Because I believe with good mental health, children see what they become, and they become what they see. And so I wanted to quit, but I couldn't. I had to be there. And it was hard as Hades to police in the black community because some of the black people appreciated me and some did not. And so, and I used to tell people, I didn't get this job to kill nobody. I got this job to save somebody. And then when people were Monday morning quarterback, I said, you tell me, when was the last time you pulled over a car and did a traffic stop and didn't have to get into the mindset of what that person or persons in that car is thinking as I'm approaching this car? I approach cars, people already had guns on me. Have you ever locked up somebody and never want to be locked up? And then if I have to use the force continuum to lock somebody up, and if they get some bruises, you're going to say I'm a bad police officer. I've been places with domestic violence. Families turned on me after I go to arrest somebody. They turned on me, trying to take my gun. So I had to hit people. But people Monday morning quarterback, that officer should have done it. If you can better police, take the test, go through the academy, and experience it for yourself. And then you'll be on both sides of the fence. When you really have compassion, you're going to patrol people, police people, the way you want to be patrolled and policed. And then you're going to see for what it really is. There are hidden people that still have this mindset. It's real. And that's why the proliferation of police killings, foot on your neck, because I still see you as a runaway. But then those who really have compassion and not afraid to speak out against the badge. I love my badge, but there were people who tarnished the badge that I wore for 25 years, and them people are the one need to be prosecuted, because those of us that really did this for compassion and a livelihood, we saved more lives here than were murdered. And I can attest to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the candor. I do. I really do. So Tiffany, we've recognized that we've had floodings here in Kentucky, not just here in Louisville, but around the state. Just not too long ago, we saw brothers and sisters in California struggle with wildfires that ruined communities. And in those moments, what we often find and see are people who are willing to show immediate acts of compassion, right? They see somebody struggling, they see somebody having a difficult time, be it house on fire, flooding, and they step in to help. That's a tragic response, or compassion responding to tragedy. But then there are other approaches to tragedy that yield a compassionate response. You led national responses to major crises like COVID-19 and racial justice initiatives. What lessons have you learned about turning compassion into action during moments of those national reckonings where you were knee-deep in that work?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say, Devon, I'm upset that you put me behind a pastor every time. It's not right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's upsetting. What I would say is I do a lot of disaster work. You know, you noted that I led our racial equity work and COVID work at Lilly, and people call philanthropy in times of crisis, in normal times, but in particular in times of crisis. One of the things you noted is that people have really quick moments of compassion and action immediately after a crisis. But the truth is they tire out really quickly, right? Like when you are dealing with hard problems, when neighborhoods get wiped out, when communities get wiped out, I mean, this is the truth of Roots 101 too, it takes a long time to rebuild people's history, their stories, their lives. And so you have to be there for the long run, right? It's your story too. You have to stay with people when you get tired. You have to exercise patience constantly. Compassion is about patience and grace, and frankly, acknowledging that trauma comes from these moments of challenge. And trauma is hard on everybody, and people don't always act rational after trauma. They don't just recover immediately. We've all had somebody pass in our lives, and everybody else is fine the next day, expects you to be fine. You're not fine, right? Like, we know that experience no matter who you are. Compassion requires you to remember that about people, provide them grace, let them tell their stories, sit with them, come back over and over to say, how can I support you now? 6 months, a year. The work never ends. And so you have to understand all of the work that everybody talked about up here is long-term work. Compassion is long-term work. Taking care of our community is long-term work. Taking care of our families is long-term work. And that's the thing you learn, is in moments of crisis, we all run towards it. I love that about humans. It's important. It's valuable. But you can't run when it gets hard. You got to stick it out.
I love that. So, absolutely. See, she preaches a little bit too, right? So, she preaching. We've got a few minutes left. I want to pause to see if there are any questions from the audience. And we've got one right here. I already see one. So we'll take a question or two from the audience before we start to wrap. You want to stand if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. For everybody who couldn't hear, it's how do we help people who are struggling with self-stigma really focus on self-compassion in particular in the mental health context? I'll kind of answer two ways. The first is that a lot of people talk about mental health services, but the truth around the data is that peer support, your family checking on you, is actually the most effective way to address mental health challenges. When they look at suicide ideation, what they find is actually there's some impulse related to that. And so just asking, are you okay, and checking in as a family member is far more effective than going to a clinic or something like that, right? So in general, we all have to get better about asking people, are you okay? Checking on people, being able to talk about our feelings, validate that mental health is important. We saw some movements in COVID, but not enough. Frankly, one of the challenges we see is that because people don't always take mental health seriously, we don't have enough psychiatrists and psychologists because people won't even take it as a career because they don't want to talk about their feelings. So we have to get comfortable asking people how they're feeling and wait. I think the other part of that that's really important, you touched on it, is stigma across the board. Like when we talk about mental health, you definitely have issues of access. You definitely have issues around quality of care, but one of the huge issues is stigma. And the best way to do that is to talk about it, to share what you struggle with, to tell people it's okay. I was sitting in front of a group of veterans and they said, we don't actually want to talk about mental health issues. We don't want to talk about PTSD because people will think we're weak. And I said to them, one, that's ridiculous. My 13-year-old who has no real problems talks about her mental health all the time, and nobody thinks she's weak. They actually think she's interesting and in touch with who she is. You've actually been through war. Like, you have real trauma. It's okay to talk about that and validate that. And so we can put systems in place, but this is really about humans. We don't touch on this enough, and then I'll leave it alone. But like in particular, we're seeing an epidemic of men who are really struggling with mental health issues. And we saw increases in the suicide rate for young African American males. Some of that is caused by systemic things, but some of it is caused by us not creating enough space for men to talk about challenges and difficulties. And so we really have to get intentional, individually and collectively, about just talking about mental health, talking about are you okay, and really meaning it and pausing.
Pass the plate. I'm just going to say, I'm going to tap into the pastoral, what I share with the congregation that I'm so blessed to serve every Sunday. I give them the theology, but they don't really realize it's the psychology. The Bible says that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. If I know that about me, there's nothing you can say to me or about me to make me forget that I am an original. And I tell my church that I'm serving, what makes you dangerous is the fact that you're different. What makes you different is the fact that you're dangerous. And never lose focus of who you are. I don't care what you say about me. I am an original creation by God. And that lifts the self-esteem. That takes away the stigma. And Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. The knowledge of you, and especially the knowledge of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear everybody talking, and I'm thinking, when we talk about mental health, and I think we lose sight of how deep mental health goes back. I have changed at the museum shackles. And I can put those shackles on people, and the trauma for 400 years ago comes like yesterday. So we have to identify the things people have been going through and will continue to go through, and not walk away from it, but walk to it. So even when we talk about mental health, when we saw the election this year, for those that believe in the American dream come crumbling down. So we had children dealing with issues they'd never heard before. We have children that woke up hearing things in school about them being slaves again. Think of the mental trauma young people are dealing with today on what we dealt with 50 years ago. So trauma is real today as it is yesterday. And if we don't get on top of the compassion of what we're dealing with today, we're going to see something we've never seen before.
And I just want to add, look at the compassion report. One of the things that we identified is that if we are going to build more compassionate communities, more compassionate systems, more compassionate companies and communities, it starts with self-compassion. Part of what we've been able to understand is that it's difficult for me to have compassion for you if I don't first have compassion for myself. And part of the way that we see that unfolding in very negative ways are people experiencing burnout, for instance. That contributes to how they show up as a compassionate person in their community. Isolation and loneliness, those things contribute to how people respond to compassionate agendas in their lives and in their communities. And so the question was a beautiful one around this need for us to make sure that we are first taking care of ourselves. What do they tell you when you get on an airplane? There's a need for oxygen. You first put the oxygen on yourself before you share it with someone else. And if we're talking about compassion, we first must start with ourselves. We're going to take one more question from the audience, and then we're going to say thank you to this great group of panelists. Is there another question? I thought I saw a hand up earlier.
So compassion in action. Action is the way of doing something. So for each of you, intentionality is also a measure of compassion. So in your daily life, how do you show tangible action and acts of compassion?
We'll let that be our closing question. How do you show, our panelists, how do you show individual acts of compassion? Be it self-compassion. We'll start with Tiffany, so she doesn't have to follow the pastor.
Thank you for finally acknowledging that that is not a comfortable position to be in. I know that was compassion. Good call. One of the things that I think is important in compassion is, well, I have a couple things, but the first is every day when I talk to people, I try to start with how you're doing. I try not to be transactional in every interaction. I take the time to introduce myself. Some poor people over there had to tolerate me, talk about my children, because compassion is actually taking the time to care about other people, no matter how busy you are or no matter what else is in your brain. I think the other part of compassion that people don't talk about is being honest with people, right? Being compassionate is being transparent, telling people when it's going to work, when it's not going to work out, so they know that you are exactly who you say you are. And that's what builds trust and compassion, and that's how I live my life, for better or for worse. You know exactly what you get when you meet me. This person here is the same as the one out there. You can tell from the person who's my friend who asked that question. That's what compassion is acknowledging that you get to show up as who you are, and everybody else around you gets to show up as who they are.
Okay. Every day, my role is to serve as the behavioral mental health specialist for Louisville Fire, EMS, Alcohol Beverage Control, LMDC, Ocean, Animal Service, call takers and dispatchers. My intentional compassion, when I see them every day, is like Ms. Tiffany said, how are you doing? Are you handling this work, or is this work handling you? And I always want to provide people a safe space. The reason why I say this, because the position that I am in now, Mayor Craig Greenberg and Deputy Mayor David James created this position. This is not a position. It came out of the compassion because when Mayor Greenberg was running for office and he was shot at, he came to my private practice. And David James and I looked at each other and said, hey, we wish we had this when we were policing. Because if you were policing then and you told somebody you had a problem, they said you were weak and a coward. They told us to suck it up. So now I treat them how I wanted to be treated, so it makes my job easy, and I don't even think I'm going to work. This is just so intentional doing ministry. And even when I was policing, I was ministering to people. And Divine, you know, a lot of people joined my church because of the involvement I had with them, criminality. So I used policing as a minister, not lacking nobody up. And then what Brother Mike talking about putting chains, in 25 years, I put handcuffs on 2 people. Everybody else, I locked up a lot of murderers, drug dealers. I said, I know who you are. I know where you live. I'm not going to lock you up in front of your children. What I want you to do is go down the street. I'm going to come around the corner, and you get in back of my car. And I had a good arrest success rate. And my wife will tell you, when most of them went to prison, they got out, they came and knocked on our door in the West End. If any of you have been on 264 Duman Hill, coming up the hill, that was my police car sitting right there. And everybody that I locked up knew where I lived, and nobody touched that house because the community said, if you mess with Preacher Man's house, we're going to mess with you. And in closing, one Sunday I was teaching and preaching. Somebody broke in my house. We didn't lock them up. The streets found out who it was. They said, you locked up, you broke in Preacher Man's house. You infringed on us. So intentionally, every day, I'm trying to be to people what I want other people to be to me. Good question.
Okay. Listen, okay, all right. You know, what I think about compassion, you can't have compassion until you find your purpose. And when you find your purpose, you find your compassion. So it's so important to teach children their purpose. And then they can find their compassion. See, I can't worry about you if I don't know who I am. Right? So what I hear today, and I love being here today, is that when we talk about, Brother Kelsey talked about beginning of slave catchers, we forgot the mentality of that slave catcher was to torment and kill that person because they thought them less than human. That's when you see things in the West End so traumatic, because when I look at you, I don't see you as human, I see you as human even today. So that's why our purpose, our compassion, so we can find each other.
I would like to say one thing. We have to learn how to give. There are so many people that do not have clothes, food, and stuff like that. And I think that we in this room have more clothes that we don't need, and that they can be donated. Wayside Christian Mission takes in people every night. And you have the goodwill, and there are a lot of things that we do. But you need to think of other folks before you think of yourself. Because we all have too much, and things that we don't need. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. We greatly appreciate you. Happy Black History Month. And if you have a moment, enjoy Muhammad Ali Center.